back, but they have a lot of spots that have a lot of competition. And honestly, that's what makes it interesting. This team is not starting from scratch by any means. We actually have the second most returning players in college football, I think. And there's experience back all over the roster, but not a ton of proven full time starters. So that means that this spring really matters. And when you start hearing certain names early, especially at receiver and on the defensive front and then secondary, it gets interesting. So today we're getting into what Kirby said, which new players are turning heads, why the offensive line still feels like the biggest question, and why Georgia's pass rush has to be better. Welcome to the Nitro College Football Show. I'm Burl.
I'm Street.
So let's start with the biggest takeaway from Kirby's opening spring press conference, because it tells you exactly what this spring is going to be about.
Yeah, so I think it was last Tuesday, Kirby kicked off spring practice with his opening presser to the media. And in typical Kirby fashion, he was a little bit enthusiastic, a little bit seemed like he was disturbed to be there, just like he always is. But he opened it up, and the very first thing straight on the front is he gave an update on injuries. And there were some that, we were kind of expecting, but there were a couple names on there that we weren't. So just a quick rundown. Drew Bobo, we knew he was going to still be out this spring. We talked about it last week in the offensive line video, chance for the backup centers competition to take shape. Jordan Hall still recovering from his injury last year. Gabe Harris still out he had turf toe surgery. Obviously, late in the year, missed the Ole Miss game. He's still out. Kyron Jones is still out. Zayden Walker, which was a new one that I hadn't heard was out. He had a labrum tear, so he had surgery for that. So he's going to miss spring. And then Carter Lucky, Lawson Lucky's little brother, who just got on campus, is out and is probably going to be missing.
Was that a shoulder or a hip?
What? Oh, the labrum tear? I don't know. I didn't hear which one it was. I think maybe it's a shoulder, but I'm not 100% sure there.
Yeah, that really sucks, because Zayden was, he's going to be counted on a lot for the pass rush.
Yeah, and he flashed, and then he flashed toward the end of the year, and then he kind of disappeared a little bit in the playoff game. He really wasn't in there much at all. It was kind of weird. It was almost like
a lot of the players on defense disappeared in that game.
Right, but he wasn't even in the game hardly. I don't even think he played in the SEC championship game either. It was really weird. His play time had gone up a bunch, and then he just disappeared. But
yeah, I wonder if he got hurt.
Yeah, he might have been. And it might have been this labrum tear, and we just didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But the one thing that Kirby did note after talking about the injuries was that, Georgia didn't take that many guys in the portal, as a lot of teams did. Georgia only took, 10 guys through the portal or whatever it was. But they still have got 30 to 40 new guys on campus because everybody enrolls early now. Pretty much your entire recruiting class is in for spring practice, and you add in transfers. And it's just a different situation than what it used to be, at the collegiate level.
Yeah, and what a luxury Georgia has this year, because, the past few seasons, Kirby's been complaining about how with the new NIL world we live in, the unlimited transfers, that he just doesn't have the depth anymore. And I feel like he's made it part of his mission to build that depth by building a culture that's going to keep people on campus. Because like you said, not a huge portal class, very small compared to literally everybody else, but retained the majority of the players on the roster from the year before. And like I said, Georgia has like the second most amount of returning starters, and that bodes well for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, he kind of discussed that, though. He said, Georgia has a lot of experienced players returning, and even guys who have made starts. But he said, though, that despite that, there weren't a lot of guys that are entrenched starters, guys that were full-time starters last year. There were some guys who may have had a start or two here, a start or two there, but not a ton of full-time starters are back. So what's that mean? That means despite having experience, you still have jobs up for grabs,
Yep. And it's going to be really interesting because there's still a lot of guys that were freshmen last year that didn't get a lot of playing time. We saw some flashes of people stepping in like CJ Wiley, and we'll talk about the receivers here in a minute. But they're going to be competing for a lot of these jobs. So just because someone was, and this goes for any Georgia team, just because you were a starter last year doesn't mean you're going to be the starter this year.
Nope. So Kirby said they went really hard this offseason. Lots of programs around the country have backed off. You hear the Indiana approach. Don't push them too hard. Kirby said they went hard on the offseason training program. They went 6 days a week in the conditioning program. Now that they are getting into the spring practice, they are on the typical Georgia spring practice 3 days a week schedule.
Well, you can do that with these young guys. But when you get those old guys like Indiana has, you don't want to work them too hard.
It's very true. Very true.
That's like the NFL practices, right? It's like,
right. Well, I mean, he said that they're really only practicing 3 days a week during spring practice. So, but I guess that's the normal spring practice schedule. Weekend Saturdays are kind of scrimmage days or whatever. I don't think they had a scrimmage yet this week because it's the first week, but they'll be having scrimmages leading up to G-Day. Kirby talked a little bit about G-Day. Plan is for it to be similar to what it has been in the past, a simulated game situation. But he did have one caveat. He said, as long as we have enough healthy players to play it. So everybody's making their plans. Tickets go on sale on the 30th. It doesn't look like they're selling tickets to season ticket holders. It's just general public. Game's not going to be on TV. Surprise, surprise. But, they are going to try to have G-Day as long as people aren't hurt. So,
well, I hope it comes to fruition. I'm looking forward to going, seeing what these new players are bringing. And, I want to see the changes in the players that were freshmen last year. And, there's one in particular we'll talk about later, Elias Williams.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. A couple other things to note. Kirby talked a little bit about the new coaching staff. Obviously, we've got 2 new full on-field coaches here, and Phil Rauscher taking over on the offensive line. Obviously, mentioned that he's been around since last year, worked with Stacey Searles last year. Stacey Searles is not gone. He just moved from an on-field coach to an analyst role, but he's working with Rauscher. So it was kind of like last year, it was the master and the apprentice, and this year, the apprentice has become the master, but the old master's still around. He's still there to help out. And then we've got Larry Knight at outside linebacker helping work on the pass rush background, similar defensive schemes, and we will talk more about that later. And then the last thing that, other than player specific stuff, which we'll talk about in the position groups, the last thing Kirby mentioned is, somebody had to ask him about uniforms, and Kirby kind of got salty and said, I don't hate alternate uniforms, but if you guys can triple the subscriptions to the Glory Collective, then we'll wear them. Okay. So
that might be the most brilliant thing he's ever said.
I know, but people are like, damn, you've raised our ticket prices. You've already asked us for more money. There's NIL. There's all this other stuff we're doing. And now, you dangle uniforms in front of us. And you know what? They always wear the black jerseys at G-Day anyway. Like, maybe he should have said, maybe those white uniforms that they show to the recruits.
Well, I think that's what they're talking about is like all these ones that you see during the recruiting pictures, with the white uniforms, the black, whatever. The white ones look pretty sick.
They really do. White do look good. So
yeah,
I'd be in favor of giving those a shot. So
yeah, I just wish they would bring back the silver britches like full time.
The full silver britches.
Yeah.
We haven't had those since Donnan, man. Rick got rid of those, I think.
Bring him back. Dig them up.
So, like I said, so why does this spring matter? Well, for Georgia, we're not rebuilding, right? It's kind of resorting your deck of cards. You've got a lot of good players in there. You got some unknowns in there. And this is just going to help us create storylines that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks.
Yep. And when spring's built like that, the first place everybody looks is the guys catching the ball. So let's talk about the receivers. So Georgia lost a lot in the wide receiver room. You lost Zachariah Branch, a bunch of other guys, Colby Young, and now we've talked about this before, but the most tenured guy in the room is London Humphreys.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned before, replacing Branch is the big deal, but you didn't just lose Branch. You lost Dylan Bell, who'd been there for 4 years and contributed for 4 years. Colby Young, who really stepped up and unfortunately got hurt. And Noah Thomas, who, didn't quite live up to the hype, but had, a couple good games here where he had a few touchdowns here and there. So a lot to replace there in that receivers room.
Yeah, but there is a lot of talent that's there. We talked about players that were freshmen last year stepping into bigger roles this year. CJ Wiley is going to be a big one. Talyn Taylor, he's probably going to be the biggest one. And then you've got your transfers. Isaiah Canion, big body guy, just like Colby Young was. And he's kind of like that prototypical outside X receiver that Kirby likes to throw the back shoulder fade to all the time.
Yeah, he's already making some noise there. Kirby actually mentioned him in particular during his opening statements. He said, that he knew about him in high school, and he ended up going to Georgia Tech because they'd backed off on him. But they're glad that they have him now. When he went into the portal, they were quick to hop on him. He's a big player. They said that he's fitting in really, really well. He's picking up the offense quick. So he's kind of already turning heads just in the limited first 2-3 days of practice, having a good rapport out there with the quarterbacks catching the ball. The other guy that you're hearing a lot about already, the buzz is there, is Talyn Taylor. This is a guy who was a 5-star at a high school, number 4 receiver in the class of 2025. And last year, his season really got cut short because he got hurt in that Alabama game and missed most of the season, made it back at the very end. Didn't get a lot of opportunities. And unfortunately for him, what most people will remember about his 2025 season was the play that he didn't make. Obviously, he burned a guy, made a brilliant move, and got wide open against Alabama. Should have been a touchdown pass that would have either given us the lead or tied it,
it would have given us the lead. It would have been a 4-point game.
Yeah. In a game that Georgia ended up losing by 3. Just a shame that, he got hurt like later in that game, I think, and missed most of the rest of the season. That was kind of leaving a sour taste, but this was a guy that everybody was high on, and he's going to need to be there. He's not as big as Isaiah Canion. He's not 6'4", 6'5". He's, 6'1", 6'2", but has, great hands, cutting ability. And we've seen that a few times. He had a couple catches in G-Day last year. He got open once and got underthrown in the Ole Miss game. We tried to hit him on a pass. So it's a guy that's coming in, and you know what? Thank God he switched off of number 11, because by God, that number is cursed for receivers. He switched to number 1. Get him away from that 11, because we saw what it did to Arian Smith. I don't want that number
seriously.
11 on a guy who's supposed to be our number 1 receiver.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this kid. I mean, we saw him last year in the spring. He looked like a man among boys, just out there making plays. And this is the first 5-star recruit first 5-star receiver that Georgia's been able to recruit in a few years now. So high expectations. Love to hear that there's a lot of buzz around him in camp this year, because the expectations are going to be through the roof, and I think it's totally warranted. I mean, he's got good size. He's everything that you need, and it would be nice to have that George Pickens type receiver again.
It would be. Obviously, it's always been tough, right, at Georgia, because we get those guys once every so often. We've had we had Pickens. Before that, we had AJ Green, but we haven't had that true 5-star crazy receiver that it seems like Alabama has at least 1 or 2 every year. Ohio State has 2 every year.
They have 4 every year.
Right. It just, we haven't experienced that. So, Talyn Taylor, if he develops, and we've got, Caden Prothro coming in, hybrid tight end receiver, 5-star guy as well, it would be nice to see some of those guys who just make those fantastic plays that you're like, wow. It'd be great to see that in the room, and it would surely help out the Georgia passing game.
Absolutely. So, do you think we're finally seeing the kind of outside receiver room that we've been waiting on for the past few years?
It's a question of development, right? Like you said, our leading returning receiver is London Humphreys. That's a lot of unknown. And last year we thought we had it, with the transfers we brought in, between Branch and his flashiness, Colby Young, who we kind of got an extra year of because of some bad legal stuff that wasn't his fault, and then Noah Thomas. Noah Thomas didn't really live up to the hype, and unfortunately Colby Young looked like he was going to, and he got hurt and broke his leg. So Branch obviously fit the bill, but it would be nice to see some guys that have come up in the program developed. And I think, part of that in the offseason, Georgia didn't chase those big receivers. People were like, oh, we got to go get Cam Coleman. Well, one, we were going to pay him like $7 million or whatever the crap he got from Texas. But
Yeah.
two, like we didn't really chase some of those other big receivers. We didn't chase the Marsh kid that ended up at Indiana or whatever. We didn't chase all those big names. And I think it's because we felt comfortable with these guys that we have. We recruited CJ Wiley. We recruited Talyn Taylor. We recruited Sokovie White. These are guys that we didn't really get to see much of last year. So it's a chance for them to kind of stay in house. And I think Georgia invested the money to keep those guys around, because like another name that you're starting to hear a little buzz on that you didn't hear or see it all last year was Thomas Blackshear.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a personal story. My brother-in-law, who my sister's kids go to school in Athens with Kirby's kids and other people, so he talks to a lot of coaches and stuff. There's been a buzz about Thomas Blackshear last year when he was still not last year, but the year before when he was still in high school. My brother-in-law was like, this Blackshear kid, people are talking, he's freaking fantastic. So he's a name that nobody really heard much about last year, but just one to watch out for. You might hear more about in the coming days.
Well, he's got a freaking cool name.
He does.
So yeah, I mean, Georgia's got to get more explosive on the outside. I think we'll do a wide receiver breakdown video one of these weeks, like we did for the O line and the tight ends. So be on the lookout for that. But drop a comment with who you think, which Georgia player, which young receiver are you most excited to watch this spring? And don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. Just hit it. Hit that subscribe button. If you love college football, if you love the Georgia Bulldogs, subscribe. We'll talk it with you all day. Now, if the wide receiver room ends up being one of the most interesting spots, the offensive line is still the most important one. And we did a deep dive last week, but we do want to touch on some things. Just some notes from the spring practice about the O line and how Phil Rauscher is really settling in.
Yeah, from what everybody said, Phil Rauscher is very vocal and very hands-on and very active. He is not a guy who's just sitting around. They said he's running around all over the place. And, when you have Kirby Smart out there yelling at people on the megaphone, sometimes other coaches may be not as loud. That's not Phil Rauscher. He's right there giving Kirby his run for the money there. I think the most important thing that you heard out of the first few days of practice is that Ernest Green is fully back at left tackle. That's going to be his position. That's where they're going to run him at. He's looking healthy again, and that's huge. That's huge for Georgia. This, once again, we talked about last week, but a guy who was a freshman All-SEC player who has not been able to stay healthy since.
Georgia needs him to stay healthy all year. Like
Right.
he needs it. Like I think we said it in last week. This is essentially a contract year for him.
It is for him, because he was a guy who after his freshman year, everybody's like, well, 2 more years and he's gone to the NFL. And now, he's back for his senior season. So that's important. Other things we're hearing. So we mentioned Kenny Boko as a potential breakout here. And so far, so good. People hearing good stuff about him. Another name that you're hearing a lot about is Zyke Helton. Now, this is a guy from Carrollton, not as highly touted. He's not a 4-star, 5-star like Akboko was. He's a 3-star guy. But you're hearing a lot about him already, a name that people are saying, yeah, this might be a guy who works into the rotation real early as a freshman, getting comparisons to Dontrell Glover already. So,
Yeah, I think 3-star linemen have such a good opportunity to outgrow or overshoot that 3-star recruiting ranking. Because I mean, Georgia just signed a guy, or not signed, but got a commitment from like Ty Johnson, who's a 3-star. This dude's like 6'7", 6'8".
he's a
So
legacy. His dad played
yeah,
at Georgia in the 90s. Yeah, I don't know his first name, but off the top of my head.
yeah,
But yeah, like you said, if Georgia's goals this spring, new offensive line coach, though he was around last year and the old coach is still around. So I think it makes that transition a little bit easier. But just getting guys in there, getting comfortable. You've got lots of experience. Like Kirby said, we have lots of guys who started but weren't full-time starters. So Dontrell Glover started a lot of games, but wasn't technically a full-time starter. Juan Gaston started a lot of games, but wasn't a full-time starter. Even Ernest Green started a lot of games, but didn't start every game the whole season. So you've
yeah.
got a lot of goes. And hell, even Drew Bobo, the most stalwart of stalwarts, missed the last 3 games of the year. So
Yeah, and this spring is really important for this group because you got a new coach coming in, or a new philosophy. Not really a new coach. I mean, I think a lot of people, rightly so, will give Phil Rauscher credit for the turnaround in Georgia's rushing game last year. But the offensive line is still trying to find their identity. What are they going to be? Are they going to be a team that's able to run the ball down your throat? Are they going to be able to be elite in the pass blocking game? We don't know yet.
yeah.
But one room that we feel great about, that's absolutely loaded, is the tight end room. And we have tight ends and other positions. The backfield is loaded. We have lots of position groups right now that are absolutely loaded. So let's start by diving into the running backs.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the big thing here with the running back room is Nate Fraser's your lead dog, right? And that's important for Georgia. Most years when Georgia has been successful, we've had kind of a lead dog there that really has helped carry it. And then a guy who's almost just as good that puts up almost just as big numbers. But you got to have that first guy, that real threat first, that home run guy. Because, we had, for every Nick Chubb, we had Sony Michel. We had a Zamir White and we had a James Cook. So we need those guys. We need a top flight guy and we need a backup guy. And Nate Fraser, is a dog through and through. But then there were rumors that he might transfer, and that scared everybody, because if you can't keep that guy around, how hard is it to keep him? So Nate Fraser being the lead dog, obviously Chauncey Bowens is back. Want him to be healthy, but Georgia felt the need to go out and get some help. They went and got Dante Dowdell from Kentucky. This is a guy, it's a 5th-year guy, and I think he's on his 5th team. He is every bit the embodiment of the transfer era of a guy who has continued to go different places. And Kirby talked a little bit about him in his opening press conference. The reason that Georgia went and got him was that they were impressed when Kentucky came to Athens last year. They were impressed by him. They saw him out there in the field, and they knew they needed somebody who could go in there and get short yardage. With Josh McCray moving on, they needed somebody, and that's who they targeted.
Yeah, you got to feel really good about the running back room, because, like you said, Nate Fraser, he is developed into a home run hitter. Chauncey Bowens last year, had he not gotten hurt, he had taken over that running back 1 position, and he was a home run hitter. Dude is shifty as hell and has some burst.
Yeah.
And
I mean, him having success last year might have been the best thing that ever happened to Nate Fraser.
Yeah,
Nate Fraser had those little fumbling issues and stuff. And after that, and Bowen started getting more run, Nate Fraser got better and better. And finally, looked like, I think the potential that he showed in his very first game, back in 2024 against Clemson. We were like, okay, we got this freshman running back. And then, it was up and down from there, and he had some fumbling issues. We knew he was good, but we hadn't really seen it. He shifted a little too much, didn't hit holes, but starting that Mississippi State game, you really saw it. He had a couple long runs, and just kind of by the end of the year, he was definitely the man for the Georgia backfield. So the development of Chauncey Bowens helped that. And, you hope that in spring practice, you see that. You see younger guys step up, because this is the thing. Georgia's deep in the backfield, deeper than we have been in terms of number of running backs. You've got Bowens. You've got Peanut. What's his what's his name back there? I can't even think of it right now.
Phillips,
yeah.
Dwight Phillips, yeah.
You got Bo Walker, and you got Jay Lamar coming in, and you've got Dell now. So it's a pretty deep room of guys.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see Dowdle. He's a big boy, and he's got some speed.
I've heard it pronounced Dowdell. Every time I've heard it on radio and other people talking about it, Dowdell. I know it's interesting. It looks like Dowdle, but Dowdell. I kind of like it,
I grew up with Chuck Dowdle, so I'm going to roll with that for now. Until I know otherwise. English wasn't my best subject. English. Yeah, so running back room looks great, really deep. Tight ends, where there's a lot of buzz around the tight end room this year. There's people just becoming more massive human beings, like Elias Williams. You see that picture the other day of him as a freshman and him now?
Oh, he's huge. He's put on lots of weight.
Yeah. He's looking like Washington.
he's every bit the height. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, tight ends super deep. Obviously, we did a whole section on tight ends a few weeks ago. If you missed that video, you can look it up in our feed there. The tight end room is awesome. One piece of note that I did hear from the first few days of practice, we talked a little bit about Ethan Barbour and his potential and his fighting back from that gruesome leg injury to play at the end of the year. And in the first couple of days of practice, it's worth noting that he's a redshirt freshman still technically after his injury. So he was the only freshman player, non-upperclassman, to get handed the blue Guardian cap, which if you don't know much about that, Kirby started it last year. They all wear the Guardian caps in practice, and they ordered these blue Guardian caps, and they give them out to players who signify, whatever the coach's mantra last year, it was fire, passion, and energy. I don't know what it is this year. If they've even
I hope it's not fire, passion, and injury. That would be terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, him getting that as a freshman, redshirt freshman, albeit, but still, while the other guys who got it, Raylan Wilson, a walk-on player, and London Humphreys were the other guys. That's kind of a big deal, right? Underclassmen getting that and showing, the respect, because he's not you've got Lawson Lucky, who's the senior leader of that tight end room. So I thought that was a pretty good sign that he's going to be counted on going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you got to feel like the coaching staff is really high on Barbour, because he was starting games so early last year as a freshman, and now he's just continuing to progress. So great to see.
Yeah. But you know what? For the tight ends to succeed and the receivers we talked before, we got to have the quarterbacks get to the ball. And one of the things that we'd hope for Gunnar Stockton in his progression this year was working on throwing the ball down the field. Some news came out over the weekend. Some people had noticed that there was some VIP practice that some people got to go to over the weekend, that Ryan Puglisi was taking almost all the snaps with the starters. Apparently there's a reason for that. So Gunnar Stockton tweaked a knee about 3 weeks ago in an off-season program, whatever. They went and had it checked out. They did all the needful, the MRIs and all that jazz. It's clean. So he should be okay.
Lance Harbor.
They said it should be clean. It's just really stiff. It's sore and stiff. It's progressing. It's getting better every day. So they are just easing him back in, kind of letting Puglisi have the reins. And you know what? With an entrenched starter who is a fifth-year player in the program, you have the luxury to do that. This is Gunner's team, no doubt. Nobody's going to challenge that. Puglisi got to play, but he didn't really get to play a ton last year.
Right.
Georgia had some times where they got behind and had to come back in some games, and so you didn't get to see him get a lot of run. So that's a good thing for Puglisi to get some snaps with the first team, because for the first time in a long time after this year, next year's going to be an open book, right? Georgia has five scholarship quarterbacks on campus this year, which they haven't. I don't know if they've had that in a while.
No, because I think last year, definitely the year before, Georgia was scrambling to get a fourth quarterback on campus because Kirby likes to keep four. At least.
Remember the year that we had to go beg Stetson to come back. So, and in this year, this day and age when guys leave, we had two true freshman quarterback last year who both came back. So that helps. So it'll be interesting to see. That's one thing I would say, if you're watching something in spring practice, and particularly when you get to G-Day, if Gunner continues to have any type of pain in his knee, I expect you won't see him much at all in G-Day at all.
Yeah, so I do find it interesting that Puglisi was getting the majority of the reps, because there's also been a lot of buzz around Ryan Montgomery.
Right. And Ryan Montgomery, was recovering from a pretty nasty ACL tear last year. So he was out there. But it's interesting, right? You're going to see more Ryan Montgomery. You're going to see some more of Hezekiah Millender, who we saw a little bit in G-Day last year, but everybody kind of knew he was low in the total. And then you've got Bryson Beaver, right, coming in. So who, once again, transfer, but really is just a freshman because he was a freshman. He's part of this class. So interesting to see what happens there. Hopefully, Gunner doesn't have any lingering effects. Georgia needs him. Luckily, this is spring practice, not summer practice. And He has experience, not like DJ Lagway, where he needs to go through spring because he doesn't have experience.
Because he doesn't know the playbook.
Right.
Yeah, just embarrassment of riches right now for Georgia. Even though they're loaded at these positions, they're still battling for who's going to get those starting roles and backup roles. So it'll be fun to watch as spring practice moves on and heading into G-Day.
Yeah.
But for me, most important defensive question is not the secondary. It starts up front. So a lot of talk about the new D-line coach. So let's talk about the D-line.
It's not D-line coach. He's outside linebacker coach. We still got the same D-line coach. So Larry Knight's the new outside linebacker coach, just to preface that. But he's going to be heavily involved, right, with our edge rushers and everything. And you're right. I mean, this is the question of the spring. If you have a question of the front seven, you've got some experience there. So in terms of tackling and things like that, Georgia should be fine. But the real question is how do they get the havoc back? How do they get the pass rush back? And why is that so important? Because the regression last year, it was horrible and it was totally bad, but it wasn't something new. So I took a look at the numbers, and this is what Georgia's sack production has gone from. In 2021, and yes, we know generational defense, insane. Georgia was fourth in the country in sacks that year, which when you have a Jordan Davis and a Jalen Carter and, all those guys, yeah, you're going to get sacks. Next year, Jalen Carter was still there, 27th in the country, which, okay, regression.
Still pretty good. Yeah.
Still pretty good. Won the national championship, right? All right. 2023, 47th in the country. So you fell, lose Jalen Carter. Okay. 2024, back up to 18th. And that was good because you know why? Because you had a Michael Williams, you had a Jalen Walker.
Exactly.
You had some pretty good guys there. But this is where it gets ugly. So last year, Georgia program, great defense, all this talent, 107th in the country. And you could say, well, it got better throughout the year. It did. But here is a little bit telling.
It did until it didn't.
Right. But here's a little bit telling about why that was so concerning and why this needs to be a point of emphasis. Georgia 107th in the country. There were 12 teams that made the college football playoffs last year. So Georgia was obviously the worst of those 12 teams at 107th. But do you know where the 11th worst team of the playoff teams was? What their ranking was in sacks in the country?
Indiana.
No, Indiana was like second in the country.
Okay,
It was
that's
Oregon.
what I thought.
It was Oregon. But how far down do you think they were? It was Oregon, but how far down in terms of ranking? If Georgia was 107th, where do you think Oregon was? The second worst.
Oh, I mean, they had to be in like the 30s.
They were 44th. Okay. So 107.
Hey, I won Price is Right, so it's good.
Right. 107 to 44th. But even Oregon was an outlier because the other 10 teams, including James Madison and Tulane, were all inside the top 30. Actually, they were all inside the top 28 because I think Ohio State was 28th. James Madison and Tulane were in the top, like they were like 16, 17. So Georgia was that significantly bad compared to everyone else in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that really was the crux of why Georgia lost against Ole Miss in the playoff game. Could not tackle Trinidad Chambliss.
I mean, 2 games, they had 0 sacks in both games against him. And yes, we know Chambliss played like a god in that game. I mean, he made some plays that were just wow. But it's just the inability to get home. And you can say that, Gabe Harris wasn't there for that Sugar Bowl. Gabe, he was hurt. But as much as I like Gabe Harris, and yes, he helps, he had 1 sack last year. It's not like he was a guy putting up a ton. So what went wrong for Georgia last year? Well, I think, one, they brought in Elo Mendoza. They thought, hey, this is a guy at Army who could come in and fit. Well, he did nothing. He was a total bust. Okay. So that was part one. And in Georgia's defense, they don't overemphasize that. Because it's not like this is the top thing. They want to create havoc, but not necessarily sacks. So it just was bad last year, straight up.
Yeah, it was. And that's been the big point of emphasis this offseason. That's why Kirby has brought in Larry Knight. He's got a good track record of bringing production in this area. We did a deep dive on that about a month or 2 ago, right when he was hired. Yep. So this is going to be a huge thing to watch throughout the season. Who do you think steps up?
And that's an interesting question, right? Because a lot of times when you say, okay, who's going to be the guy who steps up on a team and is your sack leader? And you can look to the year before and kind of see guys that were younger, but, had 4 or 5 sacks or whatever, showed a lot of pressure, whatever. Unfortunately for Georgia's just straight up didn't have that many sacks last year.
No.
So when you're looking at the pool of guys who are back, there's not a lot of guys with a lot of sacks. Your leading returning sacker is Chris Cole, and he had 4.5 sacks. And Chris Cole is going to be more relied on to be more kind of a tackler middle linebacker with CJ Allen moved on and playing alongside Raylan Wilson. So I don't think you're going to count on it because CJ Allen was the leading sacker on the team, I think, last year. I don't think you want your guys who are your middle linebackers, who are really supposed to be making tackles to be guys who are supposed to be getting sacks. They can, and that's great, right, but you don't want that necessarily. So Chris Cole was the leader there, 4.5 sacks.
Yeah, and you've got Elijah Griffith. He's a nose tackle, defensive tackle. He's not. You can't rely on him to make a ton of sacks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, everybody has big expectations for Elijah Griffin, and he flashed last year and was moving people around, and people are like, all right, yep, he's going to be the next Jalen Carter. I don't know if anybody's going to be the next Jalen Carter, but he may be a force moving people around. But Jalen Carter didn't get a ton of sacks either. It's not like he was putting up 10 sacks. That's not what you want out of your big D tackle in the middle.
Right.
Gabe Harris. Now, Gabe Harris is a guy, obviously, he was coming on getting pressure, not necessarily getting sacks at the end of the year, but he is a guy that you look to, former 5-star, that could be a guy. And then the one guy, a guy who did make some flashes last year, made some good plays. Only had 2 sacks, but once again, when we didn't have that many sacks, okay. Quintavious Johnson, that's a guy I could see stepping up as part of the core group
Yeah.
that's returning that could really, step
Yeah,
up.
Georgia really needs him to step up in this area. He stepped up a lot last year, just all around as a linebacker. Played great down the stretch. Even had some good plays in the Ole Miss game, but like we said, still couldn't get home.
Yeah, him and Zayden Walker too. We talked about him being hurt out for spring, which sucks. But both of them were the guys kind of later in the year that you saw when Georgia got better at the pass rush, better than they were earlier in the year. Those were guys that you kind of saw around the ball a lot.
Yeah, yeah. A guy that I'm extremely excited about is Amaris Williams, transfer from Auburn. He was a force against Georgia when we played them. And so when I found out we were getting him, I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot, he's going to be in that defensive end, under, defensive end, edge rusher kind of group, right? That's kind of linebacker, whatever. But yeah, he's exciting. He had 2 sacks last year for Auburn. So he could be a guy that comes in, fits that position. Another name you're hearing out of the freshmen is freshman Baldwin Sohn. 5-star, 4-star, 5-star. You're hearing a little bit of buzz about him already that people are.
Wasn't he from like Germany or something?
I think until like high school or something like that. Yeah. So you're hearing some good things about him as well.
Yep. And then there's some buzz around Raylan Wilson. He's the veteran now.
Yep.
No more CJ Allen. It's his show along with Chris Cole to really be the leaders in that group and on that defense.
Yeah, as the senior, it's his time. And at Georgia, we've had those guys. A lot of times they don't make it to senior year when they step up and take that mantle, but it's kind of, it's been a passing of the torch, right? It went from Roquan to Nakobe Dean, and from Nakobe Dean to Jamon Dumas-Johnson. And then, Jamon Dumas-Johnson kind of got passed by CJ Allen, which ended up why he transferred. CJ Allen kind of ran with it the last few years. So for Raylan Wilson, another, former 5-star, highly sought after guy who has showed some flashes at times, was a full-time starter last year and played pretty good, but now is his time. Now it's his time to be that guy on the Georgia defense, to be the lack of the better term, the captain on the defense, to really lead them out there. And good signs. We mentioned Ethan Barbour with the Guardian cap. Raylan Wilson got one as well. Early days of practice. So it's a good sign when your middle linebacker. I always say that when your most vocal leader on your defensive side is in that linebacker's room, that's always a good thing. Safeties and corners can kind of be cocky. Your defensive guys, they're hog mollies up front. They're pushing and shoving. But the guys who need to keep their heads are those guys in the middle there in the linebacker room. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So would you say that CJ Allen's time is up and Raylan Wilson's time is now? Yeah. I love it. I love it. So who do you think is going to be the go-to pass rusher this year?
I mean, I to me, it comes back to Quintavious Johnson. I think he's the guy. I think him or Zayden Walker, if Zayden Walker's healthy. I think it's one of those 2 guys that are really the guys that you look at. If Georgia's going to bring the pressure again, try to get back, like Jalen Walker did. Jalen Walker was a great pass rusher, didn't have a ton of sacks, but what did he have, like 7.5, 8, that last year? That's what Georgia needs. We don't need somebody to have 12, 13 sacks. We just don't in our defense. But if you get a bunch of guys who have 5, 6, not just a bunch of guys with 1 or 2
right,
last year,
right?
Then Georgia's defense is humming.
Yeah, I'm expecting the combo of Gabe Harris and Amaris Williams to really be the havoc in the backfield. I think Quintavious Johnson, Zayden Walker, they're still growing up. I mean, they're true sophomores, right?
Right.
So you look back on those national championship teams, you kind of forget that Jalen Walker was like a freshman or sophomore.
He was a freshman in 22, and
Yeah.
had what 2 sacks in that national championship game.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of see it kind of like that, where all right, Gabe Harris, he's been there a while. Morris Williams, lot of experience coming in, proven pass rusher, and so I think it's going to be those guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're a Dog fan and you like what you're hearing and you want to learn more about the Dogs and what's going on this year, make sure you like this video and hit that subscribe button, hit the notify bell so you know when we go live and post a video. And let's keep going. Let's keep talking. So we covered the defensive front. So let's talk about the secondary. And it looks like now, like, Georgia's got a really solid secondary, not just frontline starters, but is really starting to build some depth.
Yeah. And that's what I think they need last year. Last year was a little thin, right? We had some guys come into their own a little bit, but it was a little bit thin at times. So you've got KJ Bolden back there, All-American level player, junior year, going to be the really, one of those leaders on the defense. You got Ellis Robinson, who turned into every bit of the player we hoped he was going to be last year. By the end of the year, just locked down. Technically was still a freshman last year, though had played some the year before. And DeMello Jones took that other corner spot. It looks like really those are the two guys who are going to be your frontline starters right now, at least going into spring. And I would suspect come fall. So the interesting positions outside of that is your safeties and your star position. Who's going to, take off there? We Aguero transferred out. You had the other guy transfer up to Ohio State. I can't think who it was right now. So you lost a couple guys that you thought might be, competing for starting jobs, might be depth guys, whatever you want to call them. So we brought in some guys, out of the transfer portal to come and compete, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. Particularly starting opposite KJ Bolden. The Georgia safety room is always like we've got a star and we have another guy who's coming up. We've Christopher Smith and you had Malachi Starks. You had Malachi Starks and you had KJ Bolden coming on. And it's always, who's the guy outside the other end. So opposite KJ Bolden, the two names you're going to see, two transfer guys Georgia went and got. One is Khalil Barnes from Clemson, was a freshman All-ACC player. Been up and down since then, had some bright moments, but, freshman All-ACC or even freshman All-American, I think, at Clemson. And then the interesting one is Jamarlee Riddle, coming over from East Carolina, big hitter. So, you need that back there in the backfield. Be interesting to see where they go and who wins out.
And don't forget Zion Branch. He's still around.
He is. And, if he continues to progress, he came in a little bit, some last year, maybe wasn't 100% ready, but had a couple of nice plays here and there, got burned a couple times. So, yeah, should be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm excited for this secondary group, especially, you saw the growth of Ellis Robinson last year and DeMello Jones. I mean, they have a chance to be the top tandem in the SEC next year.
Yeah.
And, when you couple that with KJ Bolden and Khalil Barnes, I mean, that was a huge get in the portal.
Right.
That's a really solid secondary.
Yeah. Just crazy to think, man. Remember last year, speaking of spring, last year at G-Day, who did we think had the best? Who was the best player at G-Day? Who were we raving about at G-Day?
Oh, so long ago.
Harris, right?
Oh yeah, Damian Harris.
Not Damian Harris. No. Chris. Shoot. What's his? I just had his name, and then I just.
Or maybe not Damian.
Daniel Harris.
Daniel Harris.
I had Harris, and I couldn't think first name. I just had a.
Yeah, we thought Daniel Harris was going to be the man.
He played awesome. He had that crazy interception. He had a couple other crazy plays. He looked like he was going to be the man, and then the season rolled around, and he looked awful. And by the late in the year, you knew he was transferring because he wasn't even traveling with the team.
Yeah, he was done. He packed it up, took his ball and went home.
So it's interesting. Like I said, secondary players can sometimes be a little fickle. We had so it hopefully we've got the difference is I think here is obviously Bolden's coming into his junior year. Barnes and I think Ridley as well are both. Ridley might be a junior. I know Khalil Barnes is going into his senior year, so a little more experience maybe, which will help. But it's important, right? Depth in the secondary is really important because it usually dictates how aggressive Georgia feels they can be up front. If we last year that was part of the reason they didn't feel comfortable with what they had on the back end, and so didn't blitz as much or whatever. So maybe that might be part of the change of
we
philosophy.
Still played a ton of man to man.
Yeah, Kirby. Hubris, right?
We got in trouble when we went to zone. We forgot how to do anything.
Yeah, especially on a 3rd and long in the 4th quarter against Trinidad Chambliss. Yeah. Anyway,
if Everett pulls in that interception, he's the man.
I know.
But with Khalil Barnes, that Georgia's got a good track record of transfers coming from Clemson, so that bodes well.
In the secondary, no less. Yeah,
exactly. The safety position, right?
No, it was a corner.
It was
Darren
a corner.
Kendrick. Yeah,
you're
Darren
right.
Kendrick,
you're right.
And he was a big part of that national championship team. So,
yes, he was. All right. Any other news notes from spring practice or Georgia before we dive into some quick hitters?
No, I mean it's spring practice, right? It's hope springs eternal, and for Georgia, it's more of the business that Curry has at hand, which is developing players, and the mission that they've been preaching: come to Georgia, get better, and hopefully that's what they're doing this spring. And then we'll have summer. But the difference between last year and this year is there is no transfer window coming after spring this year, so can feel pretty good about what we have. Unless guys pull that route where they just unenroll and re-enroll somewhere else, which could happen. We talked about that a few weeks ago, but you feel pretty much like this is going to be the team you have. We're not going to have random crazy Elo Mendoza transfers or anything to try to fix problems this year. So hopefully they develop them well.
Trust in Kirby.
Yep.
If there's anybody who can develop, it's him. All right. Well, if you're still following along with us or you're live with us right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Help us grow this channel. We love college football. We love talking about Georgia football. And if you love that, follow us along, man.
Yep.
Okay. So we got some funny stories right here, right?
Yeah, a couple of fun ones. So first one, Matt Leinart was doing an interview the other day, and they asked him the question. They said, would you ever unretire your jersey and let somebody at USC wear your jersey? And I kind of just love his response. He said, when I got to USC, I got my number retired. You win a Heisman Trophy, automatic retired number, which is pretty cool. So our jerseys are hanging up on the Coliseum on one side. And he said there's been multiple times where people at USC have asked me, would I unretire my jersey for some prospect? And he said, and you know what I told those guys? I said, absolutely fucking not. I am never going to retire my jersey for some random dude who, by the way, now could wear number 11 and just transfer a year later. The only person that will ever wear USC number 11 would be my son, Cole, who's not there right now. He's at SMU, or my other two sons if they ended up going and play football. That's it.
I love it.
I love it because the kids now, they come in, they're obviously getting paid. Oh, I want the jersey. I want my number. But we've lost so much of tradition. And one of the traditions you love is retired numbers because they honor players. And I love that Matt Leinart is a guy who, works in national media. He's on Fox. He's very vocal, and he could be one of these modern age guys. Oh, I don't care. He's right. Yeah. I'll retire from my sons, and that's it.
I love that. And this quote's from Cody Nagel, CBS Sports. He followed it up by saying, it ain't happening, bro. I'm keeping that there forever.
Yeah. And he said, they also asked him, they said, what if a player with an NIL deal offered him tons of money? to wear it. And on that, he was even more blunt. He said, absolutely not. Would never do it. It's not for sale. And that kid, if he's offering me money out of his NIL to try to buy a jersey, the chances of him staying there after 2 years is slim anyway. It ain't happening, bro. I'm keeping it up there forever. And you can call me selfish. I don't give a shit.
I love it. I love it.
And you know, like in terms of stories and stuff, what this reminded me of is obviously at the University of Georgia, we stopped retiring numbers. The last number that we retired was Herschel Walker's, right? After that, they said, you know what, we're not going to retire numbers anymore because of stuff like this. But 34 is retired at Georgia. It's the most recognizable number ever worn at Georgia. And I remember back when I was in school, there was a recruit who wanted number 34. And he said, there's no way I'm only going to go to Georgia if I get number 34. And that was Ernie Sims, son of an NFL player, big time prospect. He was considered the top linebacker. I think he was considered the top player in the country in the class of 2023. Georgia was recruiting him. He insisted on wearing 34. Said, I won't recruit. Pretty sure Herschel said, that's fine. You can wear 34. He ended up going to Florida State. And he had a decent college career. I don't think he was the greatest player, but I think he was still a pretty high round draft pick. He played for the Lions for a few years.
Yeah.
He was a good player. So, but you know what? Like,
you got to have some balls if you're trying to go to Georgia and wear the number 34, man.
Right. At this point.
I mean, you're talking about, arguably the greatest running back in college football history. It's between him and Barry Sanders, maybe Bo Jackson.
Right.
But like, that's it. That's the group.
That's the list.
Yeah. I mean, Bo Jackson was 34 for Christ's sake.
Right. The same number. So the lesson, kids, is if the only thing you care about is a paycheck and a jersey number, don't go to USC because Matt Leinart ain't giving up his jersey.
No. And I like what Georgia does now is like you have special numbers that get passed to the next guy up. Like the number 3 at Georgia on the defense is held for that best defensive line or defensive linebacker.
Right. CJ Allen switched to that when he became the starter because he wore 33 before. You've got guys switching numbers, and actually Chauncey Bowens is switching to 3 this year. He's going to wear 3 for Georgia. In the running back room.
Early.
Yeah, he's switching from 33 to 3 this year. So even number 1's been a lot, and I mentioned that earlier.
AJ Green.
Well, he
George
wore 8.
Pickens.
But AJ Green wore 8, but but I mentioned Talyn Taylor switching from 11 to 1. So that's kind of a big deal. And Ellis Robinson wears it on defense, so earned there.
Yep. So what was George Pickens wore number 1, right?
Yeah. Yes, George Pickens wore number 1. If there was any player that signifies wearing the number 1 jersey, I think it's George Pickens.
It's George Pickens. Yeah. So
I think the
branch.
The only other more appropriate number in the history of Georgia history, other than George Pickens wearing number 1, was Darnell Washington wearing number 0.
Oh, that's right. Falcon Dog. Chauncey is 5. So that's Garrison Hurst. So that's still.
Okay. I thought he switched. My bad. I thought he was switching to 3. My fault.
Yeah.
I knew he was switching.
5 is still a big one.
Garrison Hurst. Absolutely. Garrison Hurst. Yeah. I knew he was switching numbers. Dang, I screwed that up. I sent you the number switches the other day. Dang it.
You did. And I forgot them immediately.
Oh, well. Thank you, Falcon Dog. Keeping me honest.
And I suffer from CRS. Can't remember shit.
Nice.
All right. So let's wrap up and do one more. Drinkwitz. He said some stuff.
Yeah. Last thing in the night. Eli Drinkwitz is kind of the idiot of the SEC sometimes. But he had this quote. He was talking to Chris Lowe on 3, and he said He was talking about disparities in terms of teams having, you know, huge payrolls and stuff like that. And he was trying to make a case that Missouri is not one of the haves, but we're not one of the have-nots. You know, we're kind of in the middle, whatever. And this was the quote he said. He said, if you're going to have teams that have $45 million rosters competing against teams that have $15 and $20 million rosters, you're going to run the risk of turning into Major League Baseball, where you have the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Florida Marlins. And that's a professional league that's not growing, that's struggling in their TV deals. I have lots to say that is wrong with this quote. First and foremost, number one, college football has always been about haves and have-nots.
Always.
That's what college football has always been. So if you're saying that it's becoming that, dude, look around. I mean, come on. You're in the SEC, brother. Like, you are the haves. No matter what level of the SEC you are a have.
And you were in the Big 12 before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't know this by now, you're never going to know it.
Yeah. And the ability to pay players has leveled out player acquisition. Yes.
Yeah, which by the way, worked out pretty damn well for Missouri last year. Right. Prabula and Damon Wilson.
Right. Yeah, you bought Damon Wilson after he re-signed with Georgia. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is the difference between those $45 million and $15 million teams is less than it was under the old system, mostly because of depth. You know, the difference is now that before you always had some of the lower level teams, but they had top like players. It's just the depth. The guys who aren't starting are now starting over at your school. So yeah, it's actually evened it off. It hasn't made it a bigger discrepancy like he's talking about between the Dodgers and the Marlins. Oh, and by the way, using MLB saying that they're struggling with their TV deals, the MLB has problems with their players because they might be going on strike. But last time I checked, the MLB's popularity is up. The World Baseball Classic just freaking killed it. They're doing better numbers than the NBA Finals.
I mean, just look at these players' salaries that MLB is getting. If you're like me a couple of years ago, I was like, man, how are they doing this? Because isn't baseball like losing fans? But not anymore. Like it's back. They just keep getting bigger and bigger TV deals, which is a big reason why they're able to pay these 10-year, $500 million contracts.
Right. And yeah, I agree. You don't want the Dodgers, but let's be real here. College football's only had one team that went back-to-back in the last 20 years, and that was Georgia. So what are you talking about, the Dodgers? You haven't seen that yet, Eli. Even the teams with the crazy payrolls, they didn't guarantee they're going to win. So the only point that he was really right about was later in the article, he said this. He said the problem with the world we're in right now is that the market is expanding at about a 40% rate every year because of unlimited transfers. Everybody complains about the calendar, but the reality is the calendar is just a symptom of the problem. The problem is you have unlimited transfers combined with a market that's not capped and will continue to grow at a pace faster than people keep up with. That he's right, because that's what happened. That's why we went from Ohio State being a big deal with a $20 million roster to people having $45 million rosters and $50 million rosters 2 years later. And it not be as a big deal. That's why.
Yep. The root of all the evil, like we've said many times, is the unlimited transfers.
Unlimited transfers. Yep.
You get rid of that, the rest of everything pretty much falls into place.
Yep. So that's all I got for tonight, man. You got anything else?
No, that's it for me. Thanks everybody for watching. This is the Nitro College Football Show. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Tell other college football fans about the show. Get the word out. We're here every week.
Right. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. It does mean a lot to us. Trying to grow the channel. I know it can be inconvenience, but just click the button. Just click the button.
It's a little red button at the bottom right.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot. Until next time, I'm Burl.
I'm Street.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.